Right, let's continue from where we left off. So far, we've been working on our CSS color markers, and we've done steps 1 all the way to step 2. And as a reminder, this is what we are building. Our final page is going to look like this. Okay, so let's continue from where we left off. All right, so for step 21, we want to learn about the two main color models. Okay, so we have what we call RGB, and RGB basically uses the colors red, green, and blue, and often is used in electronic devices like our smartphones, our computers, tablets, and what have you. And we also have what we call the CMYK. So for CMYK, the main colors are cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And this is often used in print. Okay. So in this project, we'll be working with the RGB model. And what this means is that the colors will begin as black and change at different levels of red, green, and blue. Okay. An easy way to see this is with the CSS function RGB, where R stands for red, G stands for green, and B stands for blue. Okay, so we want to create a new CSS rule that targets the class container and set its background to black. Okay, so now when we say RGB 000, the first number here stands for the red element. Okay, so it means there is 0 amount of red in the color we are using, there is 0 amount of green, and there is 0 amount of blue. So in that case, the color we end up with is black. Okay, so let's do an example and see. So we want to target this class here, container, which is this div here, the div containing all 3 markers. Okay, so we just say dot container, we'll bring our curly braces, and we will give it a background color of RGB, which stands for red, green, and blue. We want the redness to be 0, so no red. The greenness to be 0, no green, and the blueness to be 0 as well, no blue. And as you can see, this turns out to be black. Okay, all right, so let's continue. Now, this RGB here is a function. In programming, when we say a function, it is a piece of code that takes input and performs a specific action. Okay, so it takes an input and then it produces a certain result with that input it received. So in this case, we are using the RGB function, which takes the inputs red, green, and blue. So the first value stands for the red, the second value stands for the green, and the third value stands for the blue. So each red, green, and blue value is a number from 0 to 255. Okay, so 0 is the least and amount of that color you can get, and 255 is the highest. Okay, so as it's written here, 0 means 0% of that color, and 255 means 100% of that color. All right, so for the first one, which has a background color of red, if we want to get red using the RGB function, what we are going to do is, instead of writing red like this, we are going to write RGB. Okay, and we'll say give us 255 of red, give us 0 of green, and give us 0 of blue. And as you can see, we still have our red element like so. Okay, so next up, we want to use notice that the background color for your marker is still red. This is because you set the red value of the RGB function to the maximum of 255 or 100%, and set both the green and blue values to 0. Okay, now use the RGB function to set the other colors. In the toCSS rule, which is this one here, use the RGB function to set the background color to the maximum value of green. Okay, so the way we do that is to say RGB, and we'll say 0 for red, 255 for green, and 0 for blue. Okay, so as you can see, we have our green color here. This is different from what we had before, and there's a reason for that. We will explain it in the next lesson. Okay, so now let's work on the 3, which is the blue. So we'll say RGB, 0 for red, 0 for green, and then 255 for blue. Okay, all right, we are making progress. So next up, when the red and blue markers, while the red and blue markers look the same, like I mentioned earlier, the green is different than what it was before. Before we had a more darker shade of green, but now we have just lighter version of green. And the reason is because the green value in RGB function is, when it's 255, this is what you get. So with the previous one, the green value was 127. Okay, so let's change this color and change it to 127 and see what we get. All right, so what is happening is that if we have 255, if we have full 255 for the green, this is what we get. But then if we half it and then have 127, then this is what we get. Okay, so yeah, this is how the RGB works. It works from 0 to green, and the more green you have, the lighter shade you will get. Okay, all right, now add a little more vertical space between your markers and the edge of the container they are in. Okay, so now as you can see, the blue is hitting the bottom of the background, the red is also hitting the top of the background, and we want to add a little bit of space between them. So what we're going to do is to use the padding property, okay, which works similar to the margin. So for example, if we just write padding and we give it 10 pixels, what this does is that it's supplying 10 pixels to all sides, so top, down, left, and right. Okay. Okay, wait, something is not. Okay. So we have to add 10 pixels to the top and bottom, so that's going to be the first one. So currently, what we are doing, if we have it here, then it means we are adding 10 pixels to all 4 sides. But the challenge is asking us to add 10 pixels to the top and the bottom. And then for the left and right, we want to add 0, like so. Okay, so now we have 10 pixels for the top and bottom and 0 for the left and right. Okay. So in the additive RGB color model, which we are using now, primary colors are colors that when combined create pure white. But for that to happen, each color needs to be at its brightest. Okay, so before you combine colors, set your green markers back to pure green for the RGB function in 2. Okay, let me explain what this means. That primary colors are colors that when combined gives pure white. So assuming we set everything here to 255. Okay, let's see what happens. 255. Okay, you see, we get white. Okay, so if we have 255 of red or 100% redness, 100% greenness, and 100% blueness. If you put them together, the result you will get is white. Okay, so let me undo what I did. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to set green back to the maximum value of 255. So let's do that. 55. Okay. All right, now that you have the primary RGB colors, it's time to combine them. Okay, for the RGB function in container rule, set the red, green, and blue values to the maximum of 255. Okay, so like we did in the previous step, 255. Okay, so as you can see, 255, if we have 255 red, 0 of green, and 0 of blue, the result you get is a red. Now what happens if you have 255 of red and 255 of green? You end up with a yellow. Okay, but if you have 255 of red, 255 of green, 255 of blue, then you have white. Okay, so one advantage of using the RGB is that we can combine the colors in many ways. So it gives you that sort of flexibility to work with the colors. Okay. All right, now let's look at secondary colors. Secondary colors are colors that when you combine, secondary colors are the colors that you get when you combine primary colors. Okay, you might have noticed some secondary colors in the last step as you change the red, green, and blue values. All right, to create the first secondary color, yellow, update the RGB function in the one CSS rule to combine pure red and pure green. Okay, we know that for pure red, we need 255 of the red value. For pure green, we need 255 of the green value, like so. Okay, now a combination of pure red and pure green with no blue, because blue is set to 0, will give us yellow. Okay. Also, to create the next secondary color, which is cyan, want to update the RGB function in the to CSS rule. And in this one, I want to combine pure green and pure blue. Okay, so we already have pure green, which is 255. The value of red, of course, we want to maintain it at 0. And we want to keep the value of blue as the highest, which is 255. So now we get a combination of this and this 255, and this gives us the color cyan, which is this like lighter shade version of blue we have here. Okay, all right. Now to create the final secondary color, which is magenta, we want to update the function in the 3 CSS rule to combine pure blue and pure red. So we already have pure blues. Remember RGB. So blue is 255. We want to maintain green at 0, and we want to turn red into 255 as well. Now see what we get. This magenta color here. Okay, so if you want to learn more about color, primary color, secondary color, what we call color theory, there's this article here by Nicole Sonnenberg, and the article is available on Dev2, so I'll leave a link to the article in the description below. It's a short one, and it goes into details, gives you an overview of basic color theory for web developers, right? So I will highly encourage that you check out that article to learn more about basic color theory for web developers. All right. Okay, so here's where we'll end this video, and we'll continue in the next one from steps 31 to steps 40. Okay, so see you in the next one.